Hey everybody, welcome back to RPG Imaginings. Gen Con is on right now, and unfortunately not all of us are at Gen Con, but that doesn't mean that you can't get a preview of some books that are being released at Gen Con by Chaosium. And I'm going to do this as a two-parter because Chaosium, as Gen Con exclusives, has copies of two new Cults of RuneQuest books available at the con. Recently, I had showcased the Prosopedia, which is kind of like an encyclopedia that has basic information about the entirety of various religious pantheons of Glorantha. And this book, Cults of RuneQuest, The Lightbringers, and the book that I will feature in part 2 of this series, The Earth Goddesses, are two books that if you are at Gen Con right now, you could purchase those books in hard copy, but they will not be released on chaosium.com and out into the world until later in August. And so thank you to Chaosium for sending me these two copies of these new Cults of RuneQuest books, so that even if you're not at Gen Con, you can get a preview of what was available there and what will be available to anyone very soon. And I guess to kick this off, the way that I want to start in doing I flipped through this book before making this video, and I think that these Cults of RuneQuest books, especially the Lightbringers and Earth Goddesses, are really good examples of something that I've believed for a very long time in tabletop role-playing games, and that is that just like you should not judge a book by its cover, you should also not judge a role-playing book by its page count. I think that there tends to be this tendency in the hobby to ask, like, how many pages? Like, I want a big, thick book. I want to get value for my money. But the problem with that, anyone who has been around the hobby for decades and decades and decades knows that two books can have the exact same page count and have very large differences in their content. Now, what excites me about the Cults of RuneQuest series is that we are drawing upon material here that has existed in various forms for decades. In Greg Stafford's Glorantha that he created back in the 1960s. And as a result of that, this book is a very rich collection of information focusing on just one set of cults in Glorantha, the Lightbringers, which is the primary cults for the central location of RuneQuest, those that live in and around Dragon Pass. Okay, and definitely of the Hortling people, who are, of course, those that are the main focus of RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha. So listed as a writer in this book is Greg Stafford, because, of course, he laid down some of the early information about cults for his realm, and then Jeff Richard is also a writer for this book. We have some great artists lining up this book, and you're going to see from the artwork in here, there's some amazing stuff in here. Now, what I'm going to do here for this little preview is I'm going to show you aspects of what's at the beginning of the book, the sort of introductory mini chapters that exist for the book. And then I've already decided to pick out one particular cult that I'm going to show you in full, so you can get an idea of what is in this book. But I mean, just looking at the table of contents, all of the major Lightbringers are present in this book, the gods of the storm, but of course closely associated with the storm gods are the earth goddesses, and Chaosium opted to grant the earth goddesses their own book, and I think that makes absolute sense. And so you're not going to find Ernalda in here, for example. But that's because she is present in her own book. And I mention Ernalda because Ernalda is the wife of Orlanth, the storm god. Okay? So we get an introduction chapter here. I appreciate this introduction chapter because it offers the guidelines of what the perspective was that the authors took in writing this book, how they are treating particular subject matter, how it is organized, what the themes of are of the books, how they're utilizing names, mythology of the particular religion that is recorded in a particular book for this series, and also how they're handling the artwork. And probably of greatest note right here under the organization section, there's a series of questions here that are the same sorts of questions that humans ask when dealing with religion. Where does the world come from? Where do I come from? Why do we die? What happens after we die? Why am I here? How do I do magic? Who are the other gods? And where do we rule? And of course, the focus of this book is on the Lightbringers. Okay. There's poems at the start of each of these books. Okay, beautiful, colorful artwork. Okay, and then it delves right into those major questions, including one addition that I really appreciated here is where the cults in question started and where they have spread to in Glorantha based upon certain times. And so the Lightbringers spread to the surrounding areas very rapidly, but it took them longer to get to some of the neighboring islands. It also shows what this cult group's focus is compared to the other gods that exists in Glorantha. What are their relationships to the earth goddesses, to the lunar gods, to chaos, is the three major ones that one would expect there. So here we have an encyclopedic style basic definition of all of the gods of storm. This encyclopedic section does include Ernalda, for example, and the grain goddesses, but note that these are given much, much more detailed treatment in the book that I will show off for you in part 2 coming soon. Okay? We have a genealogy of the Lightbringers, how they are all related to each other, as well as that beautiful image that we saw at the beginning of this section. Each of the particular gods within that image are identified so that you can get an idea of what sort of aspects or what the Gloranthan tattoos or artwork might look like for them. And then we delve directly into the gods themselves. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead to Lankhor Mhy. Lankhor Mhy, the knowing god. Lankhor Mhy is the god of the Grey Lords, the sages of Glorantha, keeper of the laws, scribe of the immortals, and history singer are his titles. He is one of the 7 Lightbringers, and during that epic quest he inherited, found, fought for, and stole many pieces of the old powers, preserving them safely until time began. He even holds the sacred stone scrolls forged in the underworld to hide the secrets of the compromise from immature souls. Even so, his knowledge is not complete, and he and his cult ever thirst for more. Now, another aspect of these Cults of RuneQuest books that I really like is that these books are really answering, especially for newer players, one of the chief questions about detail, I think, that newer players have had about RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha. Everything that you need is laid out in the core book, but what this adds to the core book in terms of worshiping of particular gods of Glorantha is the precise mechanics of how one goes about participating in worship of a particular god, what their responsibilities would be as a result of being an initiate or a priest or a rune lord of that particular cult, what sort of spells they could cast, whether rune spells or spirit magic or even sorcery. And it gives the detail that a lot of, I think, less experienced players like myself have been asking for, and is now laid all out for us in these Cults of RuneQuest books. So if we look at Lankhor Mhy, There's information about the gods' history and a summary of their story before time, since time began. Where do they live? What is their relationship with life after death? What runes are they associated with? What is their common iconography? And then there's always a section for each of these cults that talks about the nature of the cult. Why do they continue to exist? So for Lankhor Mhy, the cult of Lankhor Mhy provides the same service to the material plane as its god does for the gods world. The sages, as the priests of the cult are called, provide information to all who will pay for it, whether in money or service. They also constantly quest for new information. So Lankhor Mhy cult exists because they are essentially the librarians for Glorantha. And so it goes into detail about particular social and political positions of power within the cult. So we have the black philosophers, the blue philosophers, the Charterists, the green sages, the gray lords, and the purple sages are sort of subversions of the cult's social political positions that could be held. And then what do they particularly like and dislike? And, well, of course, like many of the Lightbringers, they favor all of their counterparts amongst the Lightbringers, but they also particularly despise any who would limit or destroy knowledge. The cult strongly respects truth and despises lies, especially written lies, and like all of the Lightbringers, the cult hates chaos. Okay? How is the Lankhor Mhy cult organized? Okay? Well, basically, there is a set of temples that are organized for Lankhor Mhy. Temples to the knowing God are libraries, places where records are made and kept. Temples are built in the Y shape of the truth rune. If possible, each arm of the Y has a special function, with additional functions for the center juncture. Temples compete with one another to collect information. Most temples have several hundred or even a few thousand books and scrolls, but the greatest temples have tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of books and scrolls. Okay, how is the internal structure of people within the temple organized? What are wild sages? What happens outside the temple? Many priests of Lankhor Mhy are solitary researchers, probing into ruins and areas of strange phenomena to seek out the innermost secrets. What are their centers of power and holy places, and what are the specific days in the Gloranthan calendar in which they have holy days and high holy days? These are particularly important because that is when rune points regenerate for many, many, many cults. Notice here the emphasis on really helping the cult to come alive and helping players to be able to imagine what the daily life of the worship within the cult would be like. So what do you have to do to become a lay member of Lankhor Mhy? Okay, it's not limited to a specific race or species. Anyone can join so long as they reject chaos. Apprentices or students are young people who are apprenticed to the sages to become scribes, and they have to pass particular checks. And then worshippers are people of any race or age who come to the temple to worship and learn by paying for training. They pay all standard fees. There are going to be some requirements, some mundane benefits, some skills that are associated with Lankhor Mhy. These are called sage skills, specific spirit magic that lay members of Lankhor Mhy can join, but they are not allowed to be taught, any sorcery. And then we delve into initiate membership, the next level of membership in a cult in Glorantha. Requirements for initiation: an initiate to the cult of Lankhor Mhy must have 50% in any of the sage skills that are listed here. Once the candidate has been tested, they will automatically be accepted if they were an apprentice. If the candidate has been only a worshiping lay member, they have to pass a test. There are requirements that have to be maintained to remain initiated. Writing is an act of worship by the initiates of Lankhor Mhy. Initiates writing in the library scriptoria must follow all of these rules. There are some additional mundane benefits and favorite passions that come along with initiate membership. And these next few sections illustrate the skills, access to sorcery magic, spirit magic, and rune magic that comes along with being an initiate of the cult. So, big thing that jumps out to me here in addition to this fabulous piece of artwork right here. That is amazing. Nice. Okay. As well as a depiction of what is likely a rune priest right here. Each of these cults is going to be having particular vocations that they have a tendency to participate in because that is what that god was all about. So if Lankhor Mhy is all about knowledge, Humacht is going to be all about war and death. And so since a RuneQuest character can be initiates or lay people of multiple different cults, there is real potential to really flesh out a character and make a character unique in RuneQuest role-playing in Glorantha as a result of these requirements that are presented here. Next, we have a sage, also known as the rune priest for Lankhor Mhy. Priests of Lankhor Mhy are also known as sages. The central authority of the temple resides with them, and they are the masters of the skill schools unless there is no priest available who is a master of that school. They remain in constant training in their knowledge category skills. There are requirements to be a rune priest, restrictions that are imposed by it. For example, a sage must answer a legitimate Lightbringer summons or lose all rune points and other benefits of their god. They must never mix into individual quarrels nor participate in wars unless the temple is threatened, a Lightbringer priest or lord is in danger of death, or if facing chaos. Okay, and this is going to be different for each of the deities. The benefits and enchantments are listed. Excuse me. And then we have subservient cults, cults that may be associated or are allied with Lankhor Mhy. So, cult spirits, Lankhor Mhy is served by spirits of knowledge and by the guardians of such knowledge. Allied spirits, Lankhor Mhy provides allied spirits to his rune priests to inhabit specially prepared items such as writing instruments, okay? And then it goes through and lists out some more of these subservient cults. There's a nice little summary of what it is like to be an initiate of Lankhor Mhy. And then we have some associated cults over here. Of course, we see the Lightbringers all listed, okay? Each of them who can permit a spell or skill to their comrade via an associated cult. So, for example, Chalana Arroy, the goddess of healing, gives to her fellow Lightbringer the rune spell Restore Health. There's a series of miscellaneous notes, and I found this pretty cool when I was just perusing this. Specific to libraries, while the priests are dedicated to the collection of knowledge, they have never developed a consistent classification system. Priests will usually be familiar with the location of items relating to their specialities after a few years of getting to know the collection. Often they will add to the confusion by starting their own private library for material they take from the main library, with their hoards not often found until after their deaths. Thus, while all the knowledge of the world might be somewhere in a Lankhor Mhy temple, it may take years to find a particular item. Every high priest traditionally vows to straighten out the system, but each has a different procedure, and they rarely live long enough to implement their full system and document it. The next high priest invariably has a new system. In some libraries, the priests merely look for a free shelf or build a new one. It is thought that there might be areas completely covered by later construction within the library. I love this because, especially nowadays, there's been a lot of this, let's attend to the past, okay, like a appeal to purity or appeal to history, are logical fallacies that people have been throwing around a lot lately. But folks, just because something is old doesn't mean that it makes sense all the time. So in my opinion, this is adding a layer of realism to this cult. It would be less likely to pretend like a librarian has a perfect system that is being passed down age after age after age. There's information on how temples are shaped and arranged, and love and marriage, how that's related to the cult. Members of Lankhor Mhy of whatever station may only marry within the cult or marry those who can join the cult. This, again, is marrying truth with knowledge. Buserian. In parts of Peloria, the god of knowledge is called Buserian the Scribe. And so here we have some different ways in which the same cult is found in different regions of Glorantha. The Brown Man was an outlawed priest of Lankhor Mhy from Yuthupa and one of the 7 mothers who resurrected the Red Goddess. Within the Lunar Empire, Iripi on Tor fulfills the same cult functions as Lankhor Mhy. So seeing some connections with the Lunars. And so there you go. That is a full cult as detailed in one of the 2 releases at Gen Con from Chaosium, Cults of RuneQuest, the Lightbringers. I'm going to come back tomorrow with part 2 of this series and give you a look at the Earth Goddesses. And thanks again to Chaosium for providing these copies to me to show you what will be released very, very soon on Chaosium.com. And if you are at Gen Con, if there are any left at the Chaosium booth, go ahead and check them out because I'm sure there is a limited supply that is available at Gen Con. Okay, it's Friday now, so usually on Friday you may still have some luck. By the time you get to Saturday and Sunday, stuff gets sold out. Okay? And so I know that many of you are waiting patiently for part 3 of my Pendragon Solo Quest adventure. That will be coming out soon. So if you haven't had a chance to comment your preference as to where I should take the story next on my Pendragon Part 2 video, go ahead and do that. And I will tally up those votes and we will see where we take Pendragon Solo Quest next. So thanks everybody for watching Part 1 of Cults of RuneQuest releases for Gen Con 2023, the Lightbringers. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.